All right, sounds good. We'll call the meeting to order. Start off with the roll call.
Okay, great. Sherwood.
Here.
Vice Chair Spreen.
Here.
Tony Babel is absent. Ruth Ann Rusnak is absent. Mike Smith.
Here.
And Chris West is absent. And Tiffany Yant.
Here.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
I can't remember the if this even applies to us, but can we make decisions tonight with the number of people we have?
So we have 4 out of 7 present.
Okay.
So that's a quorum, so I believe we can.
Okay. All right, so first on the list here is approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any corrections or edits they'd like to suggest for the minutes? Okay. So I guess we'll take a motion to approve in a second.
I so move.
So Mike, you moved, and who seconded? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, motion to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed, say no. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the business items. The first one is the November meeting is on Thanksgiving. I think the question here is, do we want to cancel for the month of November? Anything you want to add to that, Captain Carlson, or we just have a discussion and make a decision?
Only thing I have to add to is, if you look at November, it's obviously on Thanksgiving, but if you look at December, that's on Christmas Eve. So it looks like we're probably going to have to move or cancel both November and December's meetings, unless there's some discussion otherwise.
I'd be open to moving at least one of them. I don't know if taking 2 months off, it feels like we're making good progress on some of these.
The only issue is, a lot of these people have other meetings at night, so it's going to be probably very difficult to find an open date that all of us can meet on. That's going to be the issue. We can attempt it.
Well, maybe I'd suggest we cancel the Thanksgiving meeting since that's closer. Maybe it's easier to schedule something in December.
All right, yeah, we can do that. We can cancel Thanksgiving or November's, and then
Don't cancel Thanksgiving.
pretty much canceled anyway. And then we can work on December's. Try to figure out a date.
Okay.
Will that work, Angie?
Yeah, I think so. We will. We'll need to contact IT and see what works for them as well, because they need to be available to set this up for live streaming and recording as well. And I know they do a lot of meetings, so that'll be part of it. But yeah, I think that we can at least attempt.
I mean, personally, for me, if it becomes too complicated to try and make it work, I'd be okay with canceling them both. But I'm not speaking for everybody else, so.
this is Mike. I'm definitely good with canceling November. You know, maybe we can via email send out a straw vote to the committee to see who would be available in the December dates before we cancel that.
All right, I'll get with Angie next week, and we'll get with IT and the city and see if we can come up with a couple dates that work for everybody and send them out. Will that work?
So, that sounds good to me. We don't need to vote on anything like that, right? That's just discussion.
I don't believe we have to vote on that.
All right. So let's move on to traffic calming. The draft council resolution.
Angie sent out that packet. Did everyone get that? Go over it.
Yeah, I did.
Yes, I did.
Any questions?
I didn't have any questions.
No, and I looked really complete, professional to me.
So that was the resolution to go to city council. So I believe you guys have to take a vote on that. If that's something that you approve, then we can take that to city council.
Great, that sounds good.
So we'll have to approve it. Vote on it.
We do or we don't?
I believe we do.
So my guess is that it would be a motion, this is Julia, a motion forwarding a recommendation to council of approval or something like that. So essentially that's the motion that I would think you would make.
Anybody want to take a stab at that? Can I make motions as a chair?
Why don't you make it, Jason?
So motion to motion to refer the resolution as provided in our packet to city council for their consideration.
Second.
Any discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed, say no. All right. Cruising right along. So the tracking sheet, no, Langer Farms roundabout.
So this is Julia again. My Wi-Fi has been a little weird this evening, so I'm going to leave my camera off and hope for the best. We'll kind of see how that goes, but I'm going to present, hopefully, presentation for you guys. More to get you in the loop. There's sort of already direction provided by council, and we're going to be moving forward with some action. But because you guys exist now, you didn't exist when we presented this to council and had the conversation. But because you exist now as a committee, we didn't want to start making improvements later on this year, early next year, without you knowing why and what we were doing. So we're providing you the background. Essentially, this is the presentation that was provided by our consultants. It's scaled down a little bit, and I am presenting it. I am certainly not the expert of all. Bob is here as well, who can fill in any questions, but it's going to be a little bit of a high-level overview. So just kind of bear in mind on that. And Bob, chime in if there's anything that I am misstating or misanswering, please. So again, we're here talking about the Century Drive Langer Farms Parkway Roundabout. It was as you probably know, it's a multi-lane roundabout. It was constructed in 2011. And over the years, there's been some community concerns about safety performance. There had been several crashes at or near the roundabout, a lot of anecdotal concerns raised about safety of the roundabout. And in October of 2019, there was a pedestrian that was hit near, at the roundabout in the crosswalk. And so the city wanted to, and again, at that time, there was a lot of people chiming in with different things that were wrong or needed to be fixed. So we really wanted, before we did anything at all, we wanted to have a better understanding of what were the issues, were there some design flaws, had things changed, and so we hired DKS to identify opportunities to improve the safety at the roundabout and to really look at it holistically. Again, we had a lot of people saying certain things, but we weren't sure if that was really an appropriate solution. So they did the study and reported their findings to the council in April, and essentially I'm going to go through what they did, what they found, and ultimately what the council direction was. So they looked at crash data, looking at ODOT crash data, safety priority index, as well as predictive methodology. And actually what they found was that there were fewer crashes in this roundabout than is expected for similar roundabouts. And that was actually sort of an eye-opener for me, because when you first think about it, any accident is bad, but when you do any sort of traffic anything, you're going to have a certain number of crashes because of user error and a variety of things, and so they sort of anticipate a certain number of accidents on transportation systems, and the roundabout actually had fewer than what would be anticipated. So that was kind of interesting. They also did field observations, looked at all the different modes of travel, and found that there's really minimal delay, but there is some driver confusion and a little bit of sight distance limitations as well at a few of the approaches. And then they really looked at the roundabout design, just all around the geometric design, the island, signing, striping, pedestrian crossing control. And they found that it's generally designed in alignment with best practices, but there were a few areas that were out of alignment, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. And a key point, though, is that it operates with excess capacity. And we'll talk about that in a second as well, but I want to just point that out. I'm not going to go into great detail on this table, partly because it's a lot of stuff I probably couldn't explain to you anyways, but this is from their presentation. And essentially what this is showing is, with the geometric design, what is best practices, our roundabout was in compliance with those best practices. That's what the green is showing. So they looked at all of those things, and the design of the roundabout geometrically was within the ranges of those best practices. They also looked at the central island design. One of the things that came up was, again, a lot of people said the problem is the mounding of the roundabout. People can't see, and that's why there is there's pedestrian conflicts. So they looked at that, and essentially, in a nutshell, the national guidance recommends mounding. The idea is that if people going into the roundabout can see the traffic coming into the roundabout on the other side, they actually might make different and poorer choices. And so it's actually safer to have that where they can't see all the way across the roundabout and make, trying to beat the traffic kind of decisions. And so this is essentially showing you what needs to be visible, the blue areas, what drivers need to be able to see in order to be safe. Bob, that's a lot of technical detail that I did not provide any technical level of information on. Do you have anything to add to that? Because that is publicly kind of an important piece.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the roundabout by itself meets the standards that are used basically nationwide. There might be some small things that we can do, signage, striping, whatever, to help guide people into and through the roundabout. But generally speaking, for a 2-lane roundabout, it meets all the national guidelines and standards. Doesn't mean that it may not mean that it is appropriate for the current situation. And I think Julia will get to that with what the recommendation is and why we're looking at that as a recommendation. But for a 2-lane roundabout, it meets the guidelines. So, you know, how people drive it and how they do stuff, that's a different animal. The mounding, it is important to understand that the intent of the mound is to focus people's attention on what they're doing in the immediate area, not looking far away. When you do that, your focus, particularly when you're driving, is not focused where it should be. And that's how accidents with pedestrians and things like that can occur. People say, I just didn't see it. It's because they were focused someplace else rather than where they should have been focused. And this is what these type of scenarios are trying to fix. So it's just a matter of educating people around the rationale behind why these things are built the way they are.
Thanks. So they also looked at the striping, as I mentioned, and overall the type and placement of markings followed best practices, but there was an area at the westbound approach where there's some inconsistent signage or striping, and so that is something that they noticed. And signing, they looked at all the signage, and again, I'll just not go through every detail of this table, but point out that most of the signage was in line with the best practices and what is recommended, except for there was missing a lane control signage. My screen is covering up what it says, so I can't read the rest of the bottom square. But so yeah, there was an area where there was some signage that was actually missing. Sorry, bear with me for a moment. They also looked at pedestrian crossing control and accessibility, and basically they found that the pedestrian accessibility is in alignment with current best practices, although the curb ramp widths are narrower than they would recommend. They're 5 feet, whereas the crosswalks are 10 feet, and generally the current practice is for the ramps to be wider and more consistent with the crosswalk. And then pedestrian crossing control, they basically what is there is appropriate, especially since there is some the RFFB, rapid response, I can't remember what the F and the B stand for, nearby.
It's rectangular rapid flashing beacons.
Thank you. So basically, based on both existing and future volumes, it was found that there wasn't a need for active control for to have those for pedestrians at the roundabout. They also looked at the operation of the roundabout, so the design and the pedestrian stuff, but they also looked at, is it operating the way it's supposed to? And that's where, when I mentioned that it is operating at excess capacity, it is. Essentially, in 2007, when this study, when the roundabout was designed, the traffic study identified a much higher volume of traffic in 2030 than what we're seeing happening today. So it currently operates at a level of service A with very few delays. So it's not needed to be a multi-lane roundabout. And there is a theory that because it is larger than it needs to be for the traffic scenario out there, that it might be contributing to confusion of drivers. So just a quick summary of what they looked at. For the most part, everything was in line with best practices in design, except for the signing and striping that I mentioned. And we had the excess capacity. And so they came up with some different recommendations, and I'll go through those and then tell you what council recommended. A short-term solution that was identified was to restripe the roundabout for only a single lane, and basically going eastbound, westbound approaches, and that would help reduce conflict, eliminate driver confusion, improve sight distance, and those types of things. And the diagram kind of shows what that might look like. A longer-term solution would be to make that permanent and have constructed narrowing of the roundabout. And so I'm going to get into what council recommended here in a moment. They also did identify that there was some sight distance limitations. There was limited sight distance at the crosswalks for the eastbound and northbound right turn vehicle movements. There's a fence and some vegetation and some elevation changes. So their recommendation was to actually acquire right-of-way at the corner to push back the existing fence line and to trim the vegetation and trees, and then actually excavate a little bit of the lot that was causing the problem. And you can see that is showing you where the fence and the vegetation and the elevation was. I mentioned as well that they found some inappropriate and confusing lane assignments. So the recommendation was the westbound, to reconfigure the westbound approach to include a left only and shared through right lane. And this shows you what that would look like. So instead of the striping that you have today, you would restripe it to be clearer and more consistent with best practices. And then they also found that there was missing signage where there should have been a sign, there wasn't. And so the solution is to install that missing lane control signage. They also looked at lighting levels. They found that the lighting levels are adequate, but could be improved for pedestrian visibility. And so another solution to that would be to upgrade the lights with LED bulbs. That's just showing you where those lights are. So we took all that to council, went through that in great detail in an hour-long work session. There were 3 packages essentially that were recommended to the council, and where council landed and provided direction is to do the restriping for a single lane roundabout. However, they did recommend or ask that we extend that so it's not just the east and westbound entry into the roundabout, but the north and southbound. And so that is the direction that staff is proceeding with. And Bob, remind me what the time frame is that we're looking at to accomplish that restriping.
Well, as soon as we budget for it.
Well, I think that Public Works has some planning, I think, to do it in the spring, I believe.
I think it was March. I think it was
March.
late March.
Yeah.
We were going to go back to DKS, I believe, and have them prepare a striping plan, modified striping plan, which shows how things were supposed to be corrected via striping. and then get that out to bid and then do it in March, but basically bid it in January.
Right. So that's essentially the plan that we are proceeding with. And we wanted to make sure that the committee had, that this committee, the Traffic Safety Committee, knew the background, knew the why, so that when we start doing those improvements, you know what we're doing. So that's a lot of information in a very short amount of time and pretty high level. So I'm sure you guys have questions, and I'd be happy to answer them and probably defer to Bob on anything too complicated.
I have a question, Tony Bevel here.
Okay.
68,000 to 70,000 for restriping.
Mhm.
So to remove striping that's there right now and then to restripe that amount, I mean that seems expensive.
Well, it is, and it's not just the restriping, it's also fixing the sight distance improvements and improving lighting. So it's more than that. And a lot of that I think can be done by, maybe able to be done by Public Works, but there's just some costs associated with the other improvements as well.
And you have to include design costs in there, engineering costs. That includes all of that. So not just, going out with the paint bucket and striping it. It's included all the costs of design, engineering, and basically bidding the project and putting it out and coming in and doing all of it.
Other questions about what or why?
What fund does that come from?
So we're still figuring out the specific details. I think there's Public Works does have a certain amount of operational funds for sort of maintaining things. There also may be some funding coming out of what we anticipated for the traffic safety improvements. And so we need to complete the design and figure out the exact, what the ultimate actual cost is, and then work with Public Works and Finance to identify what buckets that is going to come out of. And it's probably going to be multiple buckets.
What about the DKS consultation? What bucket did that come out of?
I don't remember. I think it probably came out of was that our on-call, Bob, or was that, so that would be general fund, or was it traffic,
No, it was on call.
On-call?
Yeah.
So it was just general fund. So engineering has a certain amount of money budgeted for that type of study. And so that's where that came from.
So the 68 to 70 will just be the actual work being done on the roundabout then, not the consulting and everything else that's been already taken care of.
Right.
No, engineering hasn't been done as of yet. We don't have any plans.
The work that we've already done in terms of the study, that is already paid for. So this is the implementing the study by design of the restriping and the improving sight distance, improving lighting, and restriping.
Yep.
How long do they anticipate the project to take?
Not very long. I think that I'm just recalling from earlier in the presentation, I think it could be, the actual act of doing the restriping doesn't necessarily take that long. I think that they identified that as a 2 to 3 month time frame, but it's going to depend on, when we start that kind of thing. But it's not like they're constructing something. So it's not going to be a super involved, long construction project.
You have to consider the components of what they've recommended. If you're looking at the purchase of right-of-way and the relocation of fence lines and stuff
that was
like
my next question, Bob.
That's outside the striping aspect. So, we could be doing the actual striping and get it done very short order. I would say the lighting improvements would come second. Work through PGE to get those changed out and modified, take a couple more weeks. But really to go through and negotiate right-of-way, acquisition costs and all the stuff that goes along with that, legal fees, recording fees, surveying fees, that's going to take a lot longer.
And one of the things I want to look at, and frankly, I just don't remember, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Bob about this, is the site distance issue might be lessened because we are making it a single lane roundabout. And so there essentially people are going to be further away from where that site distance issue is. And so we need to look at that and see, what was that, Bob?
That is a variable relative to the 2-lane roundabout, having to fix the site distance for 2 lanes.
Right.
Just to let people know that the idea is that eventually, some decade or 2 down the road, traffic will be at a level where a 2-lane roundabout will be warranted and needed. Then you can transfer this thing back to the 2-lane roundabout configuration just by removing striping. We don't want to throw away all the hard improvements that we've made. We don't want to reduce it and then come down the road 20 years from now and have to redo it again to bring it back up to where it was 20 years prior. So this is sort of the cheap and dirty way of, okay, we're going to make it a single lane roundabout, but we're going to maintain the ability to increase the capacity over time at the time when it's needed. So that's why we're going this route.
So I think it's great. I like the idea. I think it will remove a lot of the confusion that people have out there and will improve the safety. My only, I guess, concern moving forward as you go through the design is that that the engineer thinks about the entry and exit speeds of vehicles coming in and out. excuse me, with respect to striping, and that maybe it's striping and something else strategically placed to make sure that people do slow down going into it. Because if it's wide open, curb to center island with just striping, I could see people just kind of blowing across striping and taking that a lot quicker, which has its own set of issues. But I think through good design they can engineer that out.
I'm sure there's items that can be applied by adhesive, rumble strips and things like that would basically, people just don't want to drive through it just because they don't want to rumble their tires or their suspension. It'll rattle them around pretty good. So I think there's ways where we can do that.
So if we do that, is that going to add a lot to the cost?
No.
Good.
Any other questions?
Thank you for taking the time to share the update.
Absolutely.
That was informative. Thank you. All right, so we got the tracking sheet review. Is there anything in particular, Angela or Captain, that you'd like to go through?
001, that's been pretty much approved. So I'm going to be writing that request up next week and presenting it to the city manager for his final approval for the stop sign. So that one should be closed out hopefully by our next meeting with that stop sign. 006 crosswalk at First and Ash. Bob, you want to give an update on that, or with the?
Sure, I can give you an update. My memory was correct. As part of the spring subdivision, they did put in what would be continental striping, crosswalk striping. However, Public Works, when they did their slurry seal, basically slurry sealed over the painting and the crosswalks. So Public Works is going to go back out and reestablish those striping patterns again, and that is going to be adequate for what we're looking at. Actual signage, I don't see it as being a viable thing, but we will get the PED striping on the asphalt reestablished. Any questions about that? It's just, one of the things, maintenance goes out and they say, hey, slurry seal the street, and the guys who go do the slurry seal, but they don't necessarily go back out and redo the striping, and nobody checked. So.
Is that an item that can be closed out on our list without a formal action, since it sounds like it's taken care of?
I would say it's a matter of me following through to let you know that it's been done, that maintenance actually did go back out and restripe it.
And it would seem that we need to let the person who requested this know that this is the decision we've come to.
Yes, I will be in touch with the requester to let them know what's going on. And
Thank you, Angie.
Yep.
Whether or not that's approved, or is it just approved?
06. I think that's just approved.
Well, is it technically approved, or it's sort of not necessary? Because wasn't the request for signage?
That's the way I read it, so I wasn't sure.
It seems like it would be good to make a motion to maybe deny based on it, deny or approve whatever the group wants to do, just to kind of close it out. But it sounds like whether or not we think the crosswalk striping that that Bob was referring to addresses the issue, we could deny the request for signage or revisit.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move that we deny the request for signage and approve the replacement of the striping. That's just Ruth Resnick saying that.
I'll second that.
All right, any thoughts? Does that, Angela, does that motion work with a closure of that issue as far as I guess it would just be a denial.
Yeah, I think that should work. I see see who's all in favor and who's opposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a vote then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed, say no. All right. So should we move on to the new items then? Anybody else have any comments or thoughts on the spreadsheet there before I move on? All right, let's look at 2020-007 parking issues on Lavender Place. You pulling that up, Captain Carlson?
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
Well, Ruth had a question. Looking at the first two photographs, I'd like to clarify which drive and which house is being affected. I gather in the second photograph, it's the house that's behind the tree that's being affected by the issue.
So the way it's both houses that are affected. It's a dead end,
Mm-hmm.
and both of the driveways.
So the house behind the tree and the house directly opposite, not the house next to.
It's the two houses that share the driveway.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So is there any staff discussion or recommendation? Have you guys looked at the issue?
I drove down there and looked at it, and yeah, that is a pretty tight roadway, especially if you look at that one picture where there's multiple cars there. I think it's the third photo. There's cars on both sides of the roadway. It looks like there's a SUV kind of in the roadway. So yeah, that's a pretty tight squeeze with parking on both sides of the roadway there.
I have some anecdotal information. I walk my dog past there every night. 6 houses on that, both 3 on one side, 3 on the other. And in that short area, 13 cars. And this is not just on one occasion, just multiple occasions. And I don't know how you can, put a no parking on one side and keep people happy, which is not going to happen.
I think there needs to be no parking on both sides of that street into the dead end, because there's no room for any emergency vehicle to get down to any of those houses, especially in the evenings. And then there's a basketball hoop as well in the street, literally.
Is that legal?
No, you can't have it in the street like that.
Do we know what the street width is there, curb to curb, and if it meets with requirements for parking on both sides for emergency access? Actually, it looks like there's a no parking sign on one side of the street.
But the complaint is on the side of the street that has the no parking sign. So if you scroll down past, let's see. So we've got picture 1, picture 2 with the red marking, picture 3 with both SUVs, picture 4 with one SUV. picture 5 with the same SUV, it's their driveway that filed the complaint. And then if you go to the next one down, there's a little blue car plus a car parked behind the little blue car blocking a driveway, plus another one behind that blocking the next driveway, plus a fourth car. And that's the side that they're allowing parking on. However, everybody is parking in front of driveways all the way down the side of that street. And then if you look across to where the basketball hoop is, if there was an emergency vehicle or a fire truck that needed to get through there, it would be impossible.
Would.
I mean, that's extremely tight. And then in where the basketball hoop is located, that's 2 additional driveways. And if those individuals were trying to back out without backing into the cars behind them or hitting that basketball hoop, it's an accident waiting to happen, the entire dead end. And there's no access for emergency vehicles. My suggestion is just making the entire dead end area, or at least where those 2 driveways at the very dead end, be no parking on both sides of the street. And have that basketball hoop removed, whomever it belongs to.
Gonna be an unhappy neighborhood.
So I guess generally when there's parking issues like this, I kind of look at it from a big picture and try to understand who's parking there. And I know I can't say who's parking there because I'm not there and I'm not those people, but it doesn't appear that there's a pathway that goes out to Roy Rogers, and there's no parks nearby. And so it doesn't appear that there's a destination that's bringing people to park there from outside of the area. And so I kind of lean towards thinking that these are local residents or guests of local residents that are parking in those areas. And so I would lean towards, let's try the enforcement route first and inform the person that brought the issue up with us that when this happens to call the city non-emergency and see if there's somebody that could come out and provide some education to these people so that they don't park there, and try and solve the issue that way before we go and close an area off to parking that clearly they need parking. So taking away parking may just push the issue somewhere else.
Well,
And
so if you read the complaint, it says, since my property is on the dead end, every day my driveway is obstructed. People that live next to me, their address, constantly have large SUV parked there, even when their driveway is completely empty. So they know who's parking there. It's the neighbor, and they're deliberately parking there instead of parking in their driveway when the driveway's open. And then it says, sometimes it's even on my driveway. In addition, vehicles not parked next to the curb, but a couple feet away. So it's very difficult to enter the driveway, meaning entering their driveway at the dead end. So I think that's where the complaint is coming from, is those, if you scroll down, just even to the first photo there, there's 6 houses down there, and not the house with the yellow, but the house right next to it where the basketball hoop is. There's 2 cars right there in front of that house, back to back, plus the house that has the blue car blocking the house, 2 houses on the dead end. They're having a hard time getting out, I think is the point, is their driveway is being obstructed.
So from a enforcement standpoint, we could always, like Jason said, take that route at first. If they're blocking their driveway, I mean, that's a enforceable offense. We can enforce that. Or if they're blocking any kind of driveway, that's enforceable. We can go that route first and see if that fixes the problem.
Because I believe there's parking down on Sydney. There's a whole open street of parking where there's no homes. It's just the sides of homes, I believe.
If we were to try the enforcement route, is that something we would just send a police officer down that street every so often to see what was there, or would we wait for a complaint from the person who wrote this request?
It'd probably be generated by the person that filed this complaint. They'd call when they see their driveway blocked, and we'd go down there and take action.
So that might be our response to this person, is that we suggest they do that then at this point.
What about the emergency vehicle situation though, and them not being able to access those two houses at the very dead end that share the driveway? That's a safety concern.
So
Agreed.
I think you know, Bob or Captain Carlson could probably clarify this or confirm this, but I think that based on one side of that street is no parking, if people have complied with the law as it was today and only parked on one side of the street, there probably is enough access there for emergency vehicles. If you look at the third picture in the packet, you can see people are parking on both sides of the street. There's not enough space there, but that's already illegal today. They can't park there. And so in that instance, if someone could call and go out and get that enforcement on it, they would move the car, and then that issue would go away. And hopefully through that, doing that maybe a time or two, hopefully once, they would learn that they can't park there, and then that issue would be resolved.
Well, I think the black SUV on the right that you're speaking about, Jason, that's in their driveway. That's part of the complaint, is this L is their driveway entry. That's not a dead end curb down there. That's their driveway.
Mhm.
They share that driveway. So the Lexus to the left is blocking that individual's driveway, but the driveway on the right, that's that person's driveway. So that person is parked there because they're pulling into their driveway. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not a clear curb. It's a driveway.
I don't know. I guess maybe that's whether an officer could ticket that or not. I don't know. It looks to me like that car is parked in the street. At least the back half of it's parked in the street.
The back two tires, but the front all the way back to the back door is in the driveway, like they just pulled up. Where the car next to them is visibly parked with their wheel stopped before the little drain there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that that's not a legal parking spot where that Chevy SUV is. I think that
No,
that's.
I think it's their driveway. That's why they're parked there. But I don't think that that's the issue. The issue is the parking that's allowed on the other side of the street goes all the way into that individual's driveway. And that's where the frustration is coming from, because that Lexus SUV, and then if you keep scrolling down, they captured the back of their white vehicle, and then there's the blue Honda, and then the one right behind that, and then he can't get out, I think is the point. If you look at the little blue Honda, it's up on his driveway. If you keep scrolling down, when you can see the back of the white.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. There's also a sidewalk that goes across there that I'm sure that enforcement could deal with parking on a sidewalk. But I mean, I'm just one person. It's my own personal opinion, but I think if the other side of the street was clear like it was supposed to be, I think that a vehicle could get in and out there. And I hesitate to get rid of parking, but that's my opinion. Does anybody else?
It
have
needs to be evaluated, all of it. Like physically gone down there and measured to make sure emergency vehicles can get to that dead end. Because I don't think there should be any parking down there, because there's plenty of other parking on the side street on Sydney to Borchers. And then if you scroll down a couple more, you see where there's like two cars back to back, the orange one and on the no parking side of the street as well. in the minivan, I believe. Yeah.
So I just want to remind you that you certainly can ask staff for more information. It sounds like there's still a lot of questions, and potentially staff can look at those dimensions as well as contact TVF&R to get their thoughts on that.
Yeah, that would be super helpful, Julia. Thank you.
Well, and I'm not seeing where anything is labeled no parking. At the end of the street, there's some kind of a sign, but I can't read what it says. Where are you seeing that no parking is allowed on one side?
There's a no parking sign down on the other side of the basketball hoop, all the way down on that corner by, so
And
it's where
which-
Sydney tees up with Lavender. So if you take a left on Lavender Place, it goes into this dead end, which is driveways. And down
Okay.
right there is where the no parking sign.
Okay, is it down there by the fire hydrant? Is that what
Yes.
you're referring to? Ah,
Yep.
I just couldn't read what it said.
Yep.
Okay.
And so it's not, and then it's kind of tilted goofy. I know this because this is my neighborhood.
Okay. So if there is no parking supposedly on that side of the street, period, then definitely there are some people that probably should be notified they're parking where they're not supposed to park. And whether that's a warning or a fine, the parking on that side of the street, shouldn't be happening. And then I really see why the guy has a problem with if that Lexus is parked right there or some other car. A lot of the time, it does make it very difficult for that person to get in and out of their driveway. And it would be very awkward for a fire truck or an ambulance to get to the door of that house on the end of the street.
Yeah. It's difficult.
So can I say one thing about the access point? So even though we don't have any authority over, public roads like that, if it was like, say, a private road per the Oregon Fire Code, typically in the back of the chapter, it would talk about fire lanes. Usually you wouldn't have any parking, if a road was 20 to 26 feet in width. Usually you could have parking on one side if it's 26.1 to 32 feet, and then parking on both sides if it's 32 feet in width. Now, again, that's something that we don't regulate is the, the public roads. But we look at that from an access point. I know there's a lot of roads if you drive through Sherwood at night that when cars are parked on both sides, it definitely can get kind of tight for apparatus. And of course, parking is always an issue. It's not just in neighborhoods; it's apartment complexes and all kinds of other areas that we have to navigate through. But looking at the photos, it does look like we could get through, but it's kind of hard until you see it maybe in person and rather than just a photo. But obviously on a street like that, yeah, if it was limited to parking on one side, that would be good. I don't know the width of that road though, but I think we could make it back there.
With no parking on one side, you mean? Or do you think with parking on both sides?
It's kind of hard to tell just from the. I mean, ideally, if we could have parking on one side, that would be better. Yes, that gives us a little more width for our apparatus. But looking at the photo, I think we could get back there with the photos that I'm looking at. But it would definitely be better with parking on one side.
But apparently, parking is already prohibited on that side of the street if our neighborhood informant is correct.
Yeah, and that is correct. And
yeah, no, I just think the sign, there maybe needs to be another sign placed.
Yes.
To make it crystal clear, because what happens is you come into this dead end and it's the lip of the two driveways at the end of the dead end, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So that you don't have a choice. You have to drive all the way to the dead end. So where that Lexus is parked and where the other SUV is parked, that's the entrance into those two homes' driveway. So you pull in and then turn in like an L, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when there's nobody parked there, it's wide open and you can get in and out of your double car driveway, no problem, right? And you can back out accordingly. But when there's parking even on one side, basically anything past that basketball hoop is a nightmare to get out of. Like, and then when you have Amazon delivery and all the other different deliveries coming in and out, it compounds it. And then kids play down here too, because it's the safe dead end, right? Because there's no through traffic. So it really turns into a lot. So I just think maybe not blocking driveways would be the suggestion here based on the complaint, is they don't want their driveway blocked.
Anybody else have any thoughts from the group?
Jason, this is Mike. I agree with you. I'd like to see compliance tried first before we start putting up additional signage or anything of that nature.
How much does one no parking sign cost?
I mean, it could be $300 to $500. Bob could clarify.
$250.
There you go.
Thank you, Bob.
Is that installed, Bob?
Yes.
And if
All right.
private citizen willing to pay for that sign, would that work?
Yes. If they got approval through this committee, through police department review, through engineering review, and through city manager approval.
Wow.
Well, do we want to make a decision tonight, or do we want to ask for more information? If so, what information do we want?
So if you want to go the enforcement route, what we could do is I could do a focus patrol, have officers go check that road out daily. And then at our next meeting, whenever that is, I can report back to see if that helped with the parking or not. And then we can go from there.
I like that as a start.
Is there any way we can have somebody go out and measure the road to see if it's the 26 that he had made mention of?
I will get all the dimensions. This is Bob. I'll get all the dimensions and whether it was initially designed as a single lane parking or double lane parking, what the configuration of the road should be based on the as-built plans and everything, and I'll confirm the distances. And I'll probably give that information to Angie, who can send it on to you guys so you can have it before the next meeting.
Thank you. I checked in late. Did we decide, are we having a meeting in November?
No
We said-
meeting.
No meeting in November and potentially no meeting in December if we can't find an alternative date because it's right up at Christmas.
Okay.
So it sounds like maybe we're looking for a motion that says that we're going to recommend enforcement as well as follow-up information of the original design and the width of the curb to curb street.
And maybe whether or not, like Bob had said, it being an actual, there's two driveways there that are being blocked. Regardless of what side you put the no parking sign on.
So I have a question. These vehicles that are blocking driveways, are they the same vehicle day after day, or are this, just traffic coming off the street parking there?
Same vehicles day after day.
I mean, can we somehow leave a note saying, hey, this is this side of the street is no parking?
I have a sneaky suspicion that it's already, it may have already been politely asked.
Okay.
Well, and that would be the focus patrol that might be either issuing citations or warnings would accomplish that as well.
Yes. Or maybe if we could just adjust the no parking sign that's kind of hidden down on the corner by the fire hydrant and remove that basketball hoop. And then perhaps you could actually see that no parking sign, because I think it gets missed.
Yeah, with the basketball hoop in the street that was really not allowed, that is something that should probably be addressed as well.
And that's something that we can send to our code compliance officer for him to follow up with.
Yeah.
All right.
So we need a motion. A lot of thoughts there. You want to give it a shot, Patty?
Earlier, Jason. No. About maybe getting a few measurements. I motioned to have the street measured, and then you said it better. You do it.
A motion to
Jason.
a motion to recommend enforcement of the parking laws on that street, as well as request additional information from the city staff on the widths of the street and driveway access for follow-up the next time we meet.
Second.
Thank you.
Any discussion on that one?
This is Mike. I heard some talk there also about fixing the current no parking sign so it's more visible. Should we add that in as an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how amendments work. Technically, let's call that an amendment. So discuss that one. What would you do?
That would be a cost, I believe, right, Bob? If we have to move that sign.
Basically, if you want to do anything other than just turn it a little bit, then that's Public Works expending time and energy to pick out the sign, pick it up, move it, and install it again. Where the funds come from?
So it's not going to be $250 because the sign already exists, but there will be a cost. And maybe rather than making a decision now, you include that in the come back and give us, because I think we need to look at it and have Public Works look at it and see what needs to be done. And if it's a simple, like Bob said, turn it so it's facing the right way or whatever, or moving it, and just, come back with a little bit more information on what needs to be done.
It's on an existing street side, so it would require at least a new post. Mike, do you want to modify your amendment to ask the city to look into that and offer suggestions?
Yes, I just do that. What Julia said.
I do have a question though. So the house that is being blocked, what about the front of their driveway? Because that side of the street, there is no parking sign. There is no sign. But their driveway is still being blocked where the complaint came from.
I think wouldn't that fall under the increased enforcement?
Okay. All righty.
Well, they can't park on the sidewalk, but they can park right next to that catch basin because that's still public street. So it's kind of weird because it's not a normal situation. It's not a normal driveway. It's a dead end street. And so there's continuation of right of way through that sidewalk, and their driveway doesn't start. Their property doesn't start. I don't know. It's a unique scenario. I think I'd kind of like to get some feedback from the city on how that was initially designed. I mean, the other thing I don't know is, do those property owners have access easements that entire width there is available for each of those property owners at the end to use, or do they only get half of that width? Because I think that changes things too.
Good point.
I'll have to check the documents and see where it leads us.
All right, so we've got a motion and an amendment to add some looking into that sign. Any further discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 I,
And all opposed, say no. All right. Now we've got 2020-008 request for blinking yellow light at Crosswalk, Sunset, and Woodhaven. Does staff have anything prepared to discuss on this one, or you want us to dive into it?
I would ask if there had been any other police reports registered for that area, because I have not had any complaints from the citizens on the intersection itself relative to that. I know that we have a capital improvement project for that area, but that again is a moderate to long-term project as identified in our transportation system plan. So if there is if there's been more complaints registered for it, I'd like to know, rather than just having a system put up because somebody said, I think it needs to be done. There, just one doesn't seem to make it for that type of investment in that large a system.
Yeah, Bob, we haven't had any other complaints probably within the last, guessing 2 years. We had one a few years ago, similar. Basically, when school was in, just helping the crossing guards with the kids crossing the road there. But other than that, we have had no other complaints in that area.
I think it's probably a difficult crossing to cross because it's so wide. But I think there could be some concerns there when school starts back up. I think when I looked at this, my initial thought was similar to the one we looked at previously down the road. Let's wait and see what happens when school starts, and the high school opens and traffic increases.
Yep, and right now traffic at the Y is less because there's a lot less use there, but there's still the skate park with the kids coming and going from there, coming to that intersection a lot too. It could be a tricky intersection because so wide going across Sunset.
I think the striping could be freshened up a bit.
I guess, the one comment that was made was that trees make it hard for drivers to see people, especially at night. Maybe one thing we could do is ask staff to take a look at the sight distance for vehicles approaching that crosswalk, as well as look at lighting and try and determine if lighting is sufficient for nighttime use of the crosswalk. It looks like there's a light on both sides, but whether or not they're maybe enough, I don't know. Anybody else want to chime in on this one?
Well, I approach that intersection a lot, but hardly ever at night, so I just don't know about the lighting.
Well, that's an easy, not fix, but idea. Just have staff go out there during nighttime hours and check on the lighting.
Yeah, the lighting and that, and the visibility issues. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Does this? I'm just curious. This is probably a long shot, but does the city have a light meter?
No.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll make a motion.
There you go.
I'll make a motion to ask the city staff to check site distance at the crosswalk and to evaluate the lighting, but just from a judgment perspective, not from a technical light meter reading perspective.
Will do.
That wasn't a very concise motion. Sorry.
It worked.
Yeah, I'll second
give
it anyway,
it a
Jason.
second.
Sounded great.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed, say no. All right. So on to citizen comment. We have any?
I'm so sorry. We do not have any citizen comments for this evening.
All right. So that's it for the agenda. Does anyone want to get one last word in before we adjourn?
The only thing I have, Jason, is the signs, the yard signs. We still have about half a box. So if you guys want to still pick those up, deliver them, tell your friends. We're open 8 to noon, Monday through Friday. So again, we have about a half a box of signs still left.
Great. Thanks for the update. All right. Well, with that, we will adjourn. Thank you all.
Have a
Thank you.
good night.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Be it.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas.